Hey everybody, it is June 27th, Thursday. It's 8 p.m. at night, or a little after now. And this non-religious life, I'm your host Ken. All the way up in the Bay Area of California, we have Bob.
How's it going?
And Jason.
Hello.
And unlike some religious figures, when we say we're coming back, we actually show up. So... Here we are. I know we missed last week.
We missed a week. What a drag. But
broke
we're
our
back.
streak.
We're still in
back.
it.
We're
One
back.
week. Unforeseen difficulties.
A little bit of technical difficulties last week, so we couldn't record. But we got it mostly sorted out, and we have a bunch of things to talk about today. So we have, if you've been following the news, assuming you don't live on Mars and you're not hidden away in a cave somewhere, or you're not living some
If that was my choice.
ascetic lifestyle where you have no access to media. If you are, I have no idea how you're listening to us. But you might have realized that there's been a huge shift in how gay marriage is defined in this country. Monumental standing has just been made by the Supreme Court just a few days ago in the case of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is actually it's great. It's fantastic. And being here in California, the three of us, also Prop 8 was dismissed, which is another wonderful step towards marriage equality. What are you guys thinking about this?
I think it is a step in the right direction, and I think it's long overdue. And I think in this instance, the Supreme Court made the absolute right decision.
Yeah,
it's sort of a shame that it wasn't a unanimous decision. I can't believe it wasn't a unanimous decision.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And I'm stoked about DOMA being gone. That was such a shitty law. It was just absurd. It had, they cited the fact that it was stripping people of their rights without due process, which makes sense. I'm happy about Prop 8, but at the same time, it's kind of bittersweet. I'm a little disappointed that they didn't do more. They had three choices essentially. They could either say, Prop 8 stands, overturn the Supreme Court of California, and just, let Prop 8 become a law again. Which obviously, ruling the way they did in DOMA wasn't going to happen. Then they could do what they actually did, which was simply dismiss the case. They said that there was no standing. They couldn't bring it to the Supreme Court. It was essentially kind of out of their dealings. It wasn't for them to decide. And they sent it back down to the lower court, which had already dismissed it as being unconstitutional. And that's what they did. So Prop 8's gone. The only other thing they could have done is actually ruled on the case. They could have heard it and actually delivered a ruling based on what they heard and claimed that Prop 8 was unconstitutional at a federal level, which would have made it impossible for other states to enact similar laws. And I'm disappointed that they didn't do that. They kind of sidestepped the issue for a second. But, any win is a win, so stoked.
I say it's a big win. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big deal, and it's gonna set legal precedent, and it's gonna go a long way to going the rest of the way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's exciting because this actually comes right on the heels of something that we talk about on this show a lot. Exodus Ministry, which is known for its claim that it can cure gays, actually just closed.
But it's the reason why.
Oh, I know. Alan Chambers, the leader, admitted to being attracted to men. And it's one of those things where you can almost set your watch by it.
Yep.
you get these people who are just vehemently homophobic.
He was probably like preemptively cutting off the gay scandal right there, which I guess is good sense on his part, but
no, definitely good sense. And I mean, he issued an apology, said that he was very sorry. He hurt people.
That's too late.
Yeah, it is too late. But I mean, it's more than what we get from most people. I mean, you have people like Reverend Ted Haggard, who was caught, soliciting gay sex from, a male prostitute and doing meth, and still claims that he is just absolutely not homosexual. He's not. He doesn't claim that he's ever hurt anyone. He's a straight man with homosexual urges.
Yeah. You're having sex with a dude, you're gay.
Yeah. I mean, when you're balls deep in another man's ass, like, there's very little going back from there and be like, no, I'm utterly straight. There's definitely some debate going on, but regardless, he apologized, which is more than what you get from most of these people. And it's just interesting that it happened so soon to this whole DOMA thing with, maybe our country is becoming slightly more, inclusive and tolerant.
Well, again, it's a step in the right direction, but one of the funny things about the news cycle the last day or so has been the backlash from the conservative Christian right. They are shitting their pants.
Yeah, it didn't take long either. Like, I mean, within minutes, you had just people like foot in mouth. And just
it's the end times, Ken. End times, man. That's what it is.
Someone actually claimed that.
I know.
They do every time.
Who was it? It was oh God. Gomer and Wahlberg.
Gomer.
So Representative Louis Gomer from Texas and Judiciary Chair. Oh no. Oh God, where are you? Oh, Representative Tim Walberg from Michigan. They declared that society itself is at risk and cannot continue, and same-sex marriage was usually tried at the end of a great civilization. Like,
yeah, where do they get that? Like, where is that in a history book ever?
Look at Rome, people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's not what happened to Rome.
No. Actually, Rome wasn't very embracing of, the Romans who were in power weren't very embracing of homosexual tendencies. It's one of the reasons why they banned Greeks from competing in the Olympics when they took over the Olympics. Because Romans were all about machismo and, wrestling with other men, but you did it clothed, not naked and oiled up. There were a lot of things the Greeks did. I mean, I guess when you're super conservative, all those ancient cultures are basically the same thing, right?
Yeah, I understand that I read somewhere that just before Atlantis sunk into the ocean, that they had a law that allowed gay marriage, and then that's what happened. There you go.
That's exactly what happened to Atlantis. They started allowing. Well, they allowed gay marriage, and then it led to bestiality and all these other things.
Yeah, that's just the dumbest argument ever.
What Glenn Beck and Rand Paul insinuated within moments of this ruling. They started going off about how it's going to lead to polygamy and ultimately bestiality.
You know who I'm really disappointed with out of all this is
Rick Perry.
No, he's entirely par for the course. But Chris Christie out of New Jersey, like, I'm just starting to get to like the guy, and
dude's a douchebag.
And then he comes out opposed to, he says that the Supreme Court repeal of DOMA was a wrong move, and But I think it's kind of disingenuous the way he does it, because
He's a
he
disingenuous person.
rejects the fact that that it was a judicial decision, and he sort of makes comments that it shouldn't have been judicial fiat, it should have been a ballot measure, and blah blah blah, and I think in that instance he has it exactly wrong, because how many times have we talked about the tyranny of the majority?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the Supreme Court is supposed to protect you from, the tyranny of the majority. They're supposed to uphold the Constitution. Doesn't matter if it's popular or not.
Yeah, exactly. When you have constitutionality, you have laws coming in through popular vote, whether it be something like Prop 8, which was a ballot measure, or a congressional measure. That's just tyranny of majority. That's just democracy in action, essentially. And the Supreme Court is supposed to be the check to that.
Right.
Balance.
That's exactly
that's what it's supposed to do. That's the one thing that they're really meant to do, is to take the laws and look at them and say, is this a fair law? And I mean, I think they get it wrong a lot of the time, but it sucks that it took them this long to do it. 17 years.
And that's the thing. The heart of the whole argument, the whole crux of the Supreme Court's decision for striking down Defense of Marriage Act was that they found that those benefits enjoyed by same-sex couples that are not enjoyed by, or those benefits that are enjoyed by heterosexual couples that are not enjoyed by homosexual couples is unconstitutional. They're entitled to those benefits as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter how much you like or dislike it. It's the fact that they're entitled to them the same way that you and I are. They get it too, and that's constitutional.
What was the report today? I heard on the radio on the way to work this morning that the system is, I forget how much money the government makes off for okaying same-sex marriage now. It's like, and taxes that they earn from it is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, because a Defense of Marriage Act essentially barred same-sex marriage couples from claiming a lot of the federal benefits of marriage, for which there are tons, including being able to file your taxes jointly. Which, I mean, that's huge. That's a huge chunk of income for the federal government.
Yeah.
And it's utterly unfair, I've always said that marriage is one of two things. It's either an entirely religious institution, in which case there should be no legal benefits from engaging in it. Zero. You should get nothing. It's meaningless in the eyes of the law. It's just something that you do as part of your religious activities. Or it's an utterly secular legal institution, in which case religious definitions don't matter.
Right.
And it's one of those two, and you can't have it both ways. You can't have it be a wholly defined by religion institution, but also, try to get all these extra benefits from the government for engaging in it.
They say after 1 year of making same-sex marriage legal in the state of New York, reported $259 million in economic boost within the New York City. Just
was
in
that
1
from
year.
all the catering and all the gay weddings?
I mean,
yeah. You know why? Because weddings are fucking expensive.
yeah. that's in 1 year in one state, $259 million of economic boost. And I'm not saying that should be the sole purpose, but for governments, the only thing that they care about is bringing in revenue and upholding, the Constitution,
and getting reelected.
That's two good things there.
Yeah.
And which is why Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. They don't have to get reelected.
No. Yeah, exactly. They don't have to worry about getting tossed out either. I mean, they can be removed, but it's really only the most egregious situations that will happen.
There was a
pander.
There was a funny article on BuzzFeed that was like 25 examples of how the repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act affects you.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was like the first one was like, if you're a homosexual couple and you plan on getting married, you know, you get this and this and this. And if you're a homosexual couple and you're already married, then this, this, and this. And then it had like the other 23 were like, if you're heterosexual and blah, 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 doesn't affect you at all. If you're already married and a heterosexual, doesn't affect you at all. If you plan on getting married and you're a heterosexual, doesn't affect you at all. And then at like the very bottom of the list, it was like, if you're a heterosexual and have some vague sense of unease knowing that gay people are out there getting married, well, this could be a problem.
Yeah. I saw one, it was like 20 ways the repeal of DOMA affects traditional marriage. And it was just like 20 pictures of people going, well,
yeah.
There was that one thing. Yeah. Because it doesn't affect traditional marriage at all.
Glenn Beck and I forget who else he was talking to.
It was Rand Paul.
Yeah, that's right. They were going off on it. The conversation started was like, if Muslims come in, they can bring, marry 20 wives if they wanted to now because of this. And then it just progressively got worse all the way down to marrying a goat.
Yeah, exactly. It was like just this like slippery slope fallacy that it'll degrade into, I mean, on the first count of polygamy, that's simply not the case. The United States has already ruled that polygamy isn't legal, and of all people, of all the pundits, Glenn Beck, as a Mormon, should know that. It was a ruling against his church.
Well, Glenn Beck never let the facts get in the way
of a good narrative. I know. And then the whole argument about bestiality. It's like, no, I'm sorry, you can't. It doesn't go that far. Do you know why? Because a marriage is a legal binding contract. It's an institution entered into by two competent individuals who are of right, sound mind to be able to enter into a legally binding contract by themselves. And last I checked, animals can't do that.
Well, if you showed me the consensual goat, then I might be inclined to agree with them, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean,
well, we all know
Your
those
Honor,
animal
the
rights
goats can do it
activists
too.
I mean, if you show me the goat who is like can totally and utterly communicate and comprehends the concept of marriage and wants to enter into a marriage with a human being, I think we have bigger things to talk about than whether or not they can get married.
Holy shit! Look at that goat. Hey, so I know we could beat this one all night long, and I'm half tempted to because the fun just never ends with the right-wing pundits. But you mentioned Rick Perry, and
hell yeah,
and it's almost too good to be true that the Texas legislature endured Wendy Davis's filibuster and for women's abortion rights, and then at the same time, the timing is so good. It's so good. It writes itself. The Texas opposes these abortion measures, or wants to instill these measures to make abortion very restrictive and difficult. And then at the same time, the right to life. And then the same day, they execute their 500th inmate.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, not only did we have the filibuster, but we had the governor and his drones change the timestamp on the document saying that they actually didn't.
They're sly, devious, and underhanded. There's no doubt about it.
My favorite thing is when Rick Perry attacked Wendy Davis because she was a teenage mother herself, which is interesting. I find it's an ironic accusation that they're saying, oh, she was a teenage mother. Yeah, you're right. You should be praising her for not having an abortion. Wasn't that what you were arguing about? Don't you want the teenagers who are pregnant to have their children? You can't attack her for doing the thing that you want.
Well, Not to be on Rick Perry's side, I fucking hate this. But to be fair, he said that, and that scope of that conversation of him attacking her, he was saying that he was going up against the idea of that people, who have an abortion do it because they can't become successful adults because of children, and he was pointing out to her that she was a successful person because of that.
Yeah. I don't know, man. The tone of that seemed more slander than anything else.
True, it may have been, but in the context of what he was saying, that's the parallel he was making. Yeah. We know he's a douchebag. We know he hates women. We know he's, climbed up the cavity of God. So,
yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. It's using anecdotal evidence while ignoring societal privilege. Like, she's a affluent white woman who went to Harvard Law School. Like, she's not exactly, the horribly underprivileged, teenager from a broken home.
Well, the whole abortion debate, the whole thing gets couched in language and rhetoric that really, it chaps my ass a little bit. She had that baby. She was a teen mother. She had that baby because she made a choice. She had a choice, and she exercised her choice. It's not up for me to say what someone should or should not do with their body. And that's kind of the point. When they say, like, oh, these pro-abortion people, I'm not telling anybody to go out and get an abortion. I'm advocating they should have the choice.
Bob, you need to start.
Pro-choice. Yeah, I get abortions twice a week. That agitates me when the religious right couches it in those terms. They're anti-choice is what they are.
Yeah, no, they're definitely not pro-life, considering like you said, the 500 inmate who was
having to be a woman.
Yeah, and it was one. It's just like, how can the same day when you're jumping up and down about right to life, and then you execute your 500th inmate?
Yeah. Well, you definitely can't be pro-life when you are executing inmates at record numbers, supporting the idea of horrific, unjustified wars. You want to restrict gun legislation to next to nothing. I could go on and on.
And the thing is, like, and I've heard that argument, turned around and shot back at me, where people will say like, oh, well, you're pro-abortion, but you oppose the death penalty. And one, I think that's a false equivalency, because I'm not telling anybody to get an abortion. I'm just saying that people should have the choice, that the choice should be left to them. It shouldn't be decided by you or anybody. And the thing with the death penalty is that, one, there's studies that show that there's no pro-social positive outcomes from instituting a death penalty. If the death penalty worked, why did Texas execute its 500th prisoner?
Yeah, no, there's lots of, ethical repercussions to the idea of a death penalty. It's not a deterrent. And you know what? I actually used to be very pro-death penalty. When I was much younger, I didn't really understand it.
I think all of us were pro-death penalty when we were younger, because you don't know anything.
You don't know any better. You think, like, it makes sense to kill these inmates, but, does it? It's ridiculously expensive.
Well, and and not only that, but
absurdly expensive.
I wanna.
And is it really? I don't know. I feel like it's more of a punishment to keep someone in prison their entire life with no chance of ever getting out.
And that, you can argue the merits with that, but I think that the really, like, the black mark on the death penalty is that since the advent of DNA testing, they've demonstrated that no less than 80 people have been wrongfully executed.
Yeah.
And that number only grows.
It does, yeah.
And you know, if you could demonstrate some like pro-social outcome of instituting the death penalty, then you might be able to make the argument that like, well, those people were collateral damage, but there's the greater good. But there is no greater good. There is no positive outcome of the death penalty. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
No, you're right. There's no utilitarian argument for the death penalty because there's no benefit reaped from, and no greater benefit for society reaped, save for now someone who was accused of a crime is dead.
Yeah.
You know.
But you know, but if you want to
guilty,
examine that argument further,
again.
you can look at places where abortion became legal and readily available, and years down the road, they've shown that crime rates dramatically decrease. When women are forced to have these unwanted, unscheduled pregnancies, years down the road, crime rates increase. And then they also showed that the birth rate didn't actually decline. It stayed the same. It's just women were having babies on their schedules.
Yeah.
And then
makes sense. You're talking about financial problems in society. I mean, having a kid is expensive, and if it's unplanned, it's an unexpected cost, and you have people who struggle financially, and crime is intrinsically linked to deficiencies between people who have money and people who don't.
But you know,
Texas is the most fertile state
basic
that I
power
know.
theory in sociology. And what are you saying, Texas?
There's
I
Texas
said-
cheerleaders.
I said Texas is the most fertile state I know. There's not. I mean, there has to be something in the water because when I took Miley there for the first time, she was like, "Why are there so many pregnant people? And why are there so?"
because abortion is not readily available, and sex education is not. They teach an abstinence-only education, and they show that doesn't work. And whereas you cannot demonstrate pro-social benefits of instituting capital punishment, you can demonstrate pro-social benefits of a pro-choice policy.
Sure.
And then on the same day,
Yeah, I know.
Rick
I
Perry
mean,
sucks so bad.
The whole situation's pretty ironic on a number of levels.
I'm sure we
and
pissed
it's
off every religious person I know.
wholly frustrating. But I mean, good for her for standing up for that long.
Yeah.
And just
And
I mean,
her
they were trying to
soundbite.
get her so bad. They were saying she couldn't read from an iPad because, you know, the stipulations say she could read from a piece of paper, not a computer. It's like
They tried to
spirit of the law, it's the
undermine
same
her
thing.
at every
Like,
turn.
Well, they're still trying to do it because even since the changing in the timestamp on the vote didn't work, he said that he's going to call Rick Perry said that he's going to call a special what is it called?
The special session.
Yeah, thanks, and vote for it.
He's awful. Just that is just an underhanded. But
I hope she filibusters it again.
yeah, her soundbite was the best. Have you seen that where she said that if lawmakers want to be in the vagina business, go to med school?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't even work then because you do have the politicians who are gynecologists.
But they don't represent the consensus opinion.
No, that's true. That's true. But I mean, Ron Paul was a doctor, so. But we have bigger things to talk about. First, I want to talk about this thing that happened really quick. It'll take a few seconds. I don't know how many people saw this, but there's an ancient statue that was made as an offering to Osiris, who's the Egyptian god of death, that's being housed at the Manchester Museum in England, and it started spinning in its display case.
Yes.
The video is awesome.
I know.
Awesome. The video's rad. I watched it, and I was like, oh my god. And then I realized that it was in a sealed glass case.
Even better.
I was like, this is fucking great. And then I read that it was a curse, and I was like, well, I'm pretty sure it's not that. No one really knows what's going on, but it only moves during the day, and I wanted to try and debunk it really quick, and I'm going to toss this idea out, and you can tell me what you think, and the viewers can listen and tell me what they think. But I guarantee, if they picked up the statue and looked at the bottom, because it's man-made and it's like about 4,000 years old, they would find that the bottom is probably slightly distorted, slightly curved, and the center of gravity probably has a tilt ever so slightly to one side. And during the day, when people are walking through there, and there's construction that just started recently, there are slight vibrations that cause it to slowly shift. And because of the shape of the bottom and the slight tilt because of the center of gravity, it can only do one thing, and that's just slowly turn in a circle.
Yeah, but so the and that would that may hold up, because in the and I thought about that too. I absolutely did, and that explanation, I think, has been put forth by a couple of people, but a couple of snags. It was unclear from the video if the construction just started, or if the statue was just placed in the case. That was the part that wasn't clear. Because if it had been in the case the whole time, and then it had and nothing else was different, and then it had started to spin, that argument may not hold true, because why wasn't it spinning due to the vibration of passersby and, just coming to look at it? Or if the construction is the new point, then after the construction stops, then it stands to reason that it would stop spinning. And then the other thing is, right, it would only spin during the day, during the hours of construction. But I also seem to think it was unclear on the video because it was moving so fast, whether it was spinning at night or just during the day.
It wasn't spinning at night.
Okay, well, that helps that argument. But then also, if it is a center of gravity thing, then what would happen is it wouldn't spin a complete revolution. It would only turn to that point where the center of gravity is over the lowest point. It would only turn to a certain extent, and then it would find that resting spot where the center of gravity is straight down.
Well, that's the other thing it does. It only turns about 180 degrees or so.
Right. So if it wasn't a center of gravity thing, like it would turn 360. It would just continuously turn. But if it was a center of gravity issue, it would turn however many degrees to find that natural resting place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's one of those things, like, more investigation is necessary, but I'm confident that there is a wholly naturalistic explanation.
No,
Yeah.
y'all are both
But
wrong.
the video is cool as shit.
Y'all are both wrong. This is going to be our God.
It's a curse?
This is second coming.
Osiris is coming for you.
Yes.
I'd like it better if it was more of like a pious fraud, where like some guy was getting into the case at night and turning it just a little bit.
It'd be cool if
I'd like that better.
It only spins during the day, and you watch it during the day, turn it, and it's like, hot damn, man! Like, people are whizzing by it, and it's just slowly turning in its case. And it would be really cool if what was happening is, like, someone had it synced up perfectly so that they could get in there, turn it slightly, and shut the case before the next frame is taken.
I know, that would be great.
But I'm pretty sure he would have to be the Flash, because it was like...
Yeah. No, I mean...
Well, we don't know the timestamp on there. I mean...
Well, the video's timestamped. I can actually just start
Is it?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's like a continuous video that's sped up, or it's one of those things where it like takes a picture every 30 seconds or something like that. There's a lot of details we don't know, and if you had those, you would have a more formulated opinion of what's going on. Although, like I said, I believe that it's entirely natural.
Yeah, it looks like it
By
takes
God.
Yeah. And it might not even be the bottom of the statue. It could be where it's placed on the stand as well.
It's true. It's true.
I mean,
if there's a slight tilt, I mean...
like
talking
perfectly
about
level
differential friction.
is hard to do.
Yeah.
You want to play that?
It's definitely interesting.
I mean,
But I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's
awesome.
It's a curse, supposedly,
Yeah.
because this statue would have acted as a vessel for the spirit of the mummy it was buried with.
Yeah, you know what? As far as curses go, that one's pretty stupid.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to curse you such that my statue will spin 180 degrees over a period of 8 hours only
Wait.
during the day.
Actually, I know the perfect person we can have on the show to discuss this. Mr. John Zaffis. We had him on. Professional demonologist.
Yeah, that's a lame-ass curse. Come on, man. Like, give me some locusts or plague of frogs or some shit like that. Like, what a lame-ass curse.
I know. Of all, I mean, like, at least, like, have a spirit floating around eating people or something. Like,
Yeah. Am I scoffing?
You know?
Yes, I'm scoffing.
Egypt, ancient Egypt, let me tell you this. If that's the best you can do curse-wise, that's weak.
What a shitty curse. It kind of reminds me of stupid-ass Uri Geller with his mental powers of, like, my superpower is I can bend silverware. What a shitty superpower.
Honestly, like, that's maybe worse than some of, like, the like 3rd gen Street Fighter characters.
Yeah.
Like, what was that really tall British guy in Street Fighter who engaged in fisticuffs?
I don't know. I didn't play Street Fighter
Oh
that
god.
much.
The British guy.
Was it Rufus? Was that his name? I don't remember.
I don't know either. British guy.
Shitty superpowers.
Yeah. Shitty curse.
Okay, so brought that up. Not a curse.
Not a curse.
I want to lay it out there.
I don't believe it.
Bob,
It's
you
a
had some
curse.
other things you wanted to discuss, so why don't you?
Yeah, so I thought we'd concentrate on the second half of the show. Earlier in the week, we had a pretty lengthy email from an individual, and his name is Aaron Kren. And he responded very nice, and he wrote us an email. He reached out to us, and Aaron
which
is
we always enjoy. Which we always enjoy.
No, I totally dig it. I welcome the discourse. And Aaron is an ID proponent, and he sent us a pretty lengthy email about our stance on intelligent design. And I thought we could talk about it a little bit. And what I thought what we would do is sort of unpack his arguments a little bit, maybe talk about them, invite him to respond, and then if he chooses to respond, then next week we'll address his response to our response, and we'll have a bit of a back and forth. If he has video content, we'll link to it or include it. If he has audio content, we'll try and include that as well. If he has an email, we'll put that in the show notes. I mean, you know, I don't want to censor him in any way. I'd like to see what he has to say about it and what he thinks. And
This response has no connection to Rick Perry's response.
right, totally different response. And he makes a couple claims, and I thought we'd I thought what we would do is like, it's funny how things sort of evolve, and yeah, and
He practiced.
I
all
thought
week
that
for
I thought that what we do is talk a little bit about, and what I really wanted to do was talk about one of his claims that the flagellum of a cell is irreducibly complex, and he sort of holds that up as a truth, and I thought we would make an attempt to refute that, but. And we could talk about that for a little bit, but it seems that like most of mainstream science has already refuted that. And I really think that the bigger issue, and one of the things that he also brings up is where he says in his email that he says a few notes about ID. It is not a singular movement born out of biblical creationism. Creationism starts with the Bible. ID starts with scientific observations. And he says that ideas are both Christians and non-Christians, and many ID proponents accept the history of the life as suggested by the fossil record as well as the suggested age of the Earth. And he says that ID can make testable predictions in accordance with what we know about human designers. These predictions might include the presence of specified complexity in biological systems, the sudden origin of new genetic information in life's history, and functionality in the majority of biological components. And I think that, I think he's kind of off the mark on that, because intelligent design is warmed over creationism. And I think that we can demonstrate that. I think that the proponents of intelligent design want you to think that it's science, but it's really creationism in a cheap suit.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's not scientific. It by definition cannot make predictions, because you cannot test if something was designed by a creator. You have to guess at it and then kind of ignore anything that contradicts your stance. The idea of irreducible complexity has been debunked countless times.
Okay,
I don't want to spend too much time on it, but when you're looking at the flagellum in particular,
right? So I think for the purpose of the discussion, though, we should define, because I've noticed that, and it's funny. Like I've been looking around. I'm trying to do the research on this, and that when you look for these things, it just seems like mainstream science has just sort of like shrugged and said, "So what?" Whereas the controversy is artificially created by proponents of intelligent design. And so first of all, let's sort of define what they mean by irreducibly complex. With regards to the flagellum, they maintain that irreducible complexity means that the flagellum is made up of, the number varies depending on which flagellum and who you ask, but call it 40. And we'll talk about the E. coli flagellum, because that seems to be the gold standard that everybody works with. But the E. coli flagellum is made up of 40 or so proteins, all arranged in exactly the right way that it forms this really awesome little molecular motor that moves the little bacteria cell around. And it's awesome. It is a wonder to behold, but that does not mean that it was created by God. And or the flying spaghetti monster or aliens or any other intelligent designer. Yeah. To say that it's irreducibly complex means that we would be unable to remove any one part of it, and it would still function. And I think the ID crowd kind of moves the goalpost a little bit on this, because what they've shown, or what people have found, because, let's face it, we've only been looking at this for a couple of years. I mean, the flagellum research only started in like 93, 94, 95, and then the work on the evolution of the flagellum is maybe 10 years later, 2006. So it's not, this is kind of, everything's still kind of in its infancy. And the guys who are the main proponents of intelligent design, Dembski and Behe, they're still looking at data and studies that are, 10, 15 years old, when we didn't really know what was going on. And their argument, to me, smacks of an argument from ignorance, where they say, man, this thing is really complicated. I can't imagine how it could have come together this way. Thus, it's irreducibly complex.
The other way they move the goalpost is they look at the flagellum and they remove a piece and they say, it's not a flagellum anymore. And I don't know why you would expect it to be a flagellum if you took these pieces off. I've seen deconstructed flagellums where they take the 40 proteins and one at a time start pulling them out in order, and slowly but surely you no longer have a working flagellum, but you have other mechanical devices that work the same way all the way down until you get to nothing more than a simple cholesterol gateway that would pull nutrients into the cell.
Yeah, you're talking about that 2003 paper from Matsky, and he's the guy that hypothesized, and no, I didn't say theorized, it's a hypothesis. The pedants out there will appreciate that, but he hypothesized that the flagellum was built on a series of already existing structures, one built upon the other. And at every stage, you have like one structure that gets added, it has another structure added to it and another structure added to it. And at every stage, it's not a flagellum, but it is something else that's useful to the cell. And
that's exactly what evolution is. It's making do with what you have and improving on it. It's not the spontaneous creation of new pieces.
Yeah.
It's the slow and arduous process. And I mean, when you're talking about single-celled organism, you're talking about a vast span of time on Earth, like the far longer than we've had multicellular organisms. You're talking about a ridiculous time span.
Yeah, have you? I know I go back to Dawkins a lot on this kind of stuff, but Dawkins has a great book about this called "Climbing Mount Improbable," and he makes this analogy that this mountain of improbable events, you don't just attack it from, you don't climb the mountain from the steep side, which would be all 40 proteins arranging themselves spontaneously all by themselves. You approach it from the gradual side. The gradual side of the mountain, you get up the mountain by thousands of steps over long periods of time in a gradual descent. And if you keep heading in that direction, you'll be at the top of the mountain. I mean, that's how he sort of makes this analogy, how you get those improbable occurrences.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's I really enjoy, there's a video of him explaining the whole Mount Improbable, and he uses like an actual like model of a mountain range, and it's got multiple peaks, and he's like, organisms can only move up the mountain, that's, and sometimes they get stuck on a peak. They can't head back down, but they just kind of get stuck there, and that's what happens with single-celled organisms. They got to a point, they might be able to get a few more feet out of their journey, but I mean they're not going to be able to come down and re-evolve into a monkey or something. They're kind of stuck where they're at. But along that process, they're moving up the mountain. There's all these improbable events that happen until eventually they get to the top, where they have a whole deal of systems that they didn't have when they started.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, like, so the main proponents of ID, the guys whose names are in the nose loud, is William Dembski, Michael Behe, and Behe, he looks at the flagellum and he goes, "Wow, it's amazing. I can't imagine how this could have arrived on its own. I can't imagine how this perfect structure could have assembled on its own." And he says, "Well, so therefore it must have been done by an intelligent designer." Whereas in 2003. Nick Matsky says, "Well, I can imagine it perfectly." And he has a great video that shows you how every step of the way, it was like you get this part, and then it co-ops this part. Now it has a new function, but it's still beneficial to the cell. And then you add this part to it, and it performs yet another function, yet is still beneficial to the cell. And he may not even be right, but what he's done is imagine something a pathway to get there.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think the lesson to be learned from Behe is one of humility. You might not be able to imagine something, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Reality is not dependent on your understanding of it.
Yeah. So to say that there is no pathway to which the flagellum could have evolved step by step and still been functional, well, that's not true. Somebody's thought of one, somebody's demonstrated one. Doesn't mean it's actually the way it happened, but it's a plausible pathway. And then the other part,
plausible deniability. You could test it. It's a testable system.
Well, not only is it testable, but you can find every step of those structures in other cells. In fact, when they look at the flagellum, they only found that like every protein in the flagellum has a homologue in another cell, with the exception of 2, and it's just because they've only started looking. So I think that they're likely to find the other 2. Out of 40, there's only 2 that aren't homologous to other proteins in other cells serving other functions. So I think that with some, more looking around, they're going to find it. And another thing that Aaron brings up is the comparison of the flagellum to the type 3 secretory system, the type 3 that I have trouble saying it, the TTSS. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's like a little needle point that a bacteria cell uses to inject toxins in another cell, and they feel that is the precursor to the flagellum. The hypothesis is that the flagellum evolved from this. It's a simpler structure that had a previous function and evolved into the flagellum with the addition of a few parts. And they sort of discount that, where they say like, well, it's not a flagellum, therefore it doesn't count as evidence against irreducible complexity. And I feel that that's moving the goalpost a little bit.
Yeah, it is moving. It's absolutely.
Or it's demonstrating a misunderstanding of evolution in general.
Yeah. Well, it could be a little both, too. And I feel like when you have people like Behe, who are trained scientists, and should understand the evolutionary factors and how it all works in the process, I feel like in his case, it's simply moving the goalpost. But most ID proponents, I mean, just like most anybody, aren't trained scientists and don't necessarily understand the complexities of what evolutionary biology implicates.
I think that Behe's being a little disingenuous, and I think that he's taking the stance. He should know better, and he's taking the stance because he's making money doing so. He's selling books and writing papers, and
no, it's in my opinion with Michael Behe, it's no different than a scientist who falsifies data in order to get a paper published.
Well, he does, right? But the thing is, he doesn't even have to falsify the data. He just makes up a new argument and writes a book about it, and he can sell it. Which I don't know. That's a little bit of a ad hominem attack, but whatever. And another part to the irreducible complexity is where they say you can't knock any one of those proteins out, of the 40 proteins that make up the flagellum. You can't knock any one out, and then it'll still function. But there's other papers that they're just in the last couple of years that have shown that that's not true either. It doesn't function as well as a flagellum should, but it still does something.
Yeah, no, it still functions, and even as a flagellum,
just not as good,
not very well. And it's no different like when you're looking at evolution of multicellular creatures. The evolution of the human hand. We're gifted with the fact that our hand is fairly slim. It's very dexterous, and we have a lot of motor control over it, as opposed to some of our great ape relatives who have slightly clumsier hands. They're still fairly dexterous when compared to, some of the monkeys or prosimians, or going further back, you get to rodents. But it's the improvement of a system. The fact that our hand is better than a rat's hand doesn't mean they're not related. Right.
Yeah, that's sort of like this concept of evolution that I think escapes people. Like, you always hear the guys who are the ID proponents where they say, like, well, it would be like a hurricane blowing through a junkyard and then spontaneously assembling a 747. And I'm like, well, that's stupid, because even if you think about airplanes in general, airplanes evolved. That design evolved. Look at the Wright brothers plane. We don't fly across the country in that. That was just the first attempt. I mean, it's a bad analogy.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a bad analogy when you try to reduce complex biological life to the idea of a created man-made device.
Well, and so here's the thing about intelligent design is that they say it's non-theistic. They say it's non-theistic in nature, but they're so coy about it. They're like, well, it takes an intelligent designer. Well, who is that intelligent designer? And they're like, God. No, I mean, it could be anybody. It could be any intelligent. They don't say, but what they really mean is God. That's what they mean. And if you don't think that, then you're believing what they want you to believe about that, because Behe and Dembski and everybody else involved in that group, they have a Christian fundamentalist agenda. They are pushing creationism in disguise.
Yeah, no, it's warmed over creationism, and you can tell from the ID literature that used to just be straight up creationist literature. And there have been cases where these textbooks, these ID textbooks, I believe it was of Pandas and People.
Yeah, you're talking about C-design propensists.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think is hilarious.
It's hilarious because it's just it's a typo that when they were just using a Control F search function to replace all, they missed it because it was a typo.
Well, yeah. And that came out in the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial.
Yeah.
And in the book was originally titled Creation Biology, and it was published in 1983. But that got struck down because of a previous court case, like Aguilera versus Brown, I think, where they said you cannot teach creationism in school. It's unconstitutional. It violates the separation of church and state. And so then that same publishing company, they took the book, they got rid of anything that said creationist and inserted design or design proponents, and they retitled it Of Pandas and People, and they published it in 1987. But there was this one word in the book, and the word, it should have been creationist, but somehow design proponents got inserted in there. So it became seed design propensists. And it was so funny because in the press they called that the transitional fossil.
Transitional, yeah, exactly.
It was a transitional fossil between creationism and intelligent design.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, it's that missing link,
And then Dembski and Behe were singled out in the Wedge document, which was another document where it got leaked. I forget what year it was. It was around 90. It was around that same time. It was around after the Aguilar-Brown decision, where the religious right, this group, they were the what were they called? The FTE, it was some Christian think tank, and they wrote this document called the Wedge document, where they said, basically, this is how we sneak creationism in. They said, and they said, and we've got this guy, Michael Behe, who's willing to talk with us about this, and we've got this other guy, Dembski, who's willing to be a proponent for this. And they lay out the plan step by step, and it took them years to acknowledge that this is what they even did, and it took another court case for them to own up to it, and that was Kitzmiller versus Dover.
Yeah.
They're so disingenuous about it. If you don't believe that intelligent design is just repackaged creationism, you're buying their propaganda.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, but I mean, I'm interested to hear what he has to say. Obviously, we want to keep this dialogue going, and if we can dedicate half the show to talking about it for a little while and have a little back and forth, I think that'd be fantastic.
It gets me all excited. Is it hot in here, or is it just me?
Put your pants back on.
But I'm sure that's probably right around
You have 1 minute.
time for us now, huh?
I could go. I'd really like to talk more about the Kitzmiller-Dover trial because there was stuff that Behe and Dembski said, and then they were there trying to smear, what was her name, Barbara Forrest, and it's a debacle. The whole thing was a travesty of errors, and the judge that wrote the decision on that did a great job, in my opinion.
I think we'll have to save it for next time, though.
But again, I invite Aaron to respond. I'd like to hear what he has to say about it, and we'll try and address any of your concerns or any of your points.
Absolutely. So anyone else who wants to get in touch with us and contact us and let us know what you think about our comments about this and anything else, You can email us at nonreligiouszombie.popcorn.com. Like us on Facebook, Google Plus.
Yeah.
What's that? You can call the ZPN hotline.
He's doing the Kool-Aid man. Oh yeah.
iTunes, Stitcher Radio, all those wonderful things. Visit the website, sign up for the emails, and we will see you next week.
Maybe by next week we'll get a new graphics card and won't have to.
By next week? No, I don't think so.
With Jason's poor computer skills.
We're gonna keep this show going because I'm gonna beat Bob's ass. Because I think we had this conversation before, but anyway, y'all have a good night.
Good night.